This works. Hello, Andrew. Can you hear me? Andrew, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. There we go.
Great. I'm going to make you a host.
Okay, perfect.
There we go. And I'm going to make Christo a host too. Is that what you want or not?
No, just myself is absolutely fine.
Great. Hi, Christo. Christo, can you hear me?
He's probably just checking his sound there.
Okay. Alexa, please shut off sound.
Christo, we can't hear you there, Christo. Still no sound there, Christo. Have you unmuted yourself?
I'm going to try to unmute him. Hold 1 second.
Christo,
can you hear us?
It will come up now.
Okay. You can hear me now?
Yeah, that's good, Christo.
Is it good? Okay, perfect.
I'm just going to test my sharing the screen quickly for the PowerPoint.
Unmuted by host.
Okay, Christo, can you see the slides there? Does that look normal?
Yes, yes, it's normal. It's normal. I see it.
Okay, I'm just going to go through, so that's working there.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to leave that on. Christo, like I said to you, so we'll do half an hour, and then there'll be questions from the participants.
Okay, okay.
Christo, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your time and experience and life journey with us. It's a real gift that you're providing our community, and we're deeply grateful.
That was my pleasure. I'm very happy I could have been on it. I just want to get something. Yeah, I got something I want to show you during my presentation. Maybe I can show you now. It's a book which I have here. I hope you can see it. It's Mandela and the Jewish Memories of Mandela. I don't know if you know that book.
I'm not familiar with that book, but please share about it, because I'm sure that members of our audience are going to wonder about Mandela's relationship with Israel and with the Jewish community in South Africa and beyond.
That's correct, because this book was specially printed and due by Chief Rabbi Cyril Harris. Sir Harris was brought by the shul in Johannesburg, brought it out. Quite a thick book.
Okay, great. Please share it and please inform our audience.
I think, Christo, will you do that like you normally do when you talk about the reflections at the funeral?
Okay, okay. I will do that.
All right, cool.
We're going to be getting started in about 8 minutes, and I'm going to set up for it to be going live together with our social media platforms, so it's reaching as many people as possible.
Brilliant.
That's perfect.
Christo, at the start, I'm going to ask you when you moved to the city, and then I'll just prompt you to talk about when you were first sent to Robben Island. And then then I'll introduce the story at the census office. I mean, we'll go through it as usual,
Okay.
but you know how it works.
Okay.
I think Christo's a professional by now.
No, not yet. And you are speaking from where now, Rabbi Salman?
Yeah, I'm in Jackson Hole, Wyoming is where our community is, but I'm actually right now in Las Vegas as we speak.
Was Las Vegas? Oh, okay.
And with my
Everything
wife,
in Vegas.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I'm with
Vegas.
my wife.
That's correct.
I'm with my wife here for just the weekend. We're going to be leaving
Okay.
tomorrow.
I was also there 2 years ago in Vegas.
It's a fun little place.
That's quite busy. I don't know if it's busy now during this time, but it was very busy and very hot.
It's very hot, that's for sure. It's not as busy as usual,
Yes.
but
Yes. And what hotel are you staying in?
I'm right now in the Encore.
Encore. Okay.
Yeah.
I was there in a Bellagio.
Yeah, they're all great hotels.
Great hotels. Mm.
Okay. I'm going to just be taking care of some technical things.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, Andrew falling off the rock now in Hermanas.
We'll be starting in 4 minutes.
Perfect.
Great to see you, Pamela. Feel free to come online so we can see your face. Great to see you, Steve. Thank you for joining us, Josh. Rabbi Mendy, are you on? Hi, Malka. We're going to be starting in just 2 minutes. Rabbi Mendy, good to see you. We're going to be starting in just 2 minutes.
Did you go live on Facebook yet?
No, I'm doing that as we speak.
Okay, because I want to do a Zoom watch party so everyone can join also.
Great. It's going to be going on just a minute. If you are on Facebook and can see this going live, please click that you are on. Please share where you're tuning in from or just say hello. We'd love to be sure that you're joining us and that this is all working out just fine. If you are on Facebook, click like, say hello, let us know that you are with us so we can begin this morning's presentation. Josh, I love you, brother. Okay. Can someone who's on Facebook just let me know that you're watching me live so I know that this is working? Please click like. I see some of you are watching. Please click like if you are here with us so I know that this is on live.
Andre, can you Facebook click? As your Facebook, can you know live click?
Okay, we are ready to get started. Thank you all so much and welcome to all of you who are joining us for today's Zoom presentation with Christo Brand, Nelson Mandela's prison guard and friend. My name is Rabbi Zalman Mendelson and I have the unique pleasure of serving as the co-director of the Chabad Jewish Center of Wyoming together with my wife, Razy. It is wonderful to see familiar faces, and it is my great pleasure to welcome those of you who are joining us for the very first time. Our mission at Chabad, at all Chabad Jewish centers, all across the world, is to share the beauty of Jewish tradition, history, education, and Torah with the Jewish community and beyond. Most importantly, and I say this all the time, during these challenging times, we know that these Zoom presentations are a form of community gathering and are particularly important, bringing all of us together in a state of unity. Today, we are fortunate to have with us our dear friend, Rabbi Mendy Cohen of Chabad in St. George and Southern Utah. Please give your attention to the rabbi and spiritual leader of the community there, who will share some brief greetings and a very brief Torah thought. Rabbi Cohen, please come on mic and please share with our communities.
And so from there, I found a
Am I on?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Beautiful to see so many people joining together. Again, my name is Rabbi Mendy Cohen, Chabad of St. George. So nice to be here. Just a little Torah thought. This week's Torah portion is Pinchas. So the question of the week is, how should we judge others? So we learn about the story of Pinchas. When he saw people doing an immoral act in public, he stood up and killed them in public. So that act caused the plague to stop and saved the Jewish people. So some asked, what was the reason behind what Pinchas did? Was he doing it for the right reason? Was he doing it because he had a killing streak? Because he was the son of an idolater? And it was an adulterous act? What's the reason behind his act that he did? So Torah tells us that he was the son of Elazar and the grandson of Aaron the priest, the high priest. So what does that tell me? So to answer the question, how should we judge others? We have to look at the Torah. What did the Torah do? The Torah could have judged this person, Pinchas, and said, listen, he's the son of an idolater, and he probably did it for the wrong reasons. He didn't do it for the right reasons. Or you could take the Torah approach. What did the Torah say? The Torah said that he was the grandson of Aaron the priest. And what does that mean? He did it for the right reasons. So even though going up and killing somebody could look very horrible, but the Torah looked a little deeper and said he was the grandson, and he did it for the right reasons. So this is a lesson for us that every time we have a situation that we're dealing with somebody else, we have to always judge somebody favorably, because we can never know what really happens and what's really going on in someone else's life. When it comes to life, different things come up. It's always better to have the positive perspective in life and always doing things in the right perspective, because the only thing they have control over, you can change, is your perspective and your attitude. And that's what we have control over, and that's what we can do to make this world a better place by doing things in the proper perspective. So with that, we'd like to begin of doing things right and good in a good way. L'chaim.
Thank you, Rabbi Cohen, for that very brief Torah thought. And I guess the takeaway from what you're talking about is always look at another person from a perspective of love. If we have the opportunity to see everyone with love, the world will be a much more loving place. It's one of the most basic mitzvahs in the Torah, Ahavat Yisrael. The schedule this evening will begin with a half-hour interview conducted by Andrew Russell with our guest of honor, Christo Brand. Please send in your questions to the chat on this Zoom during the initial half-hour dialogue, and we will ask your questions directly to Christo after the conclusion of the interview. Please do not ask questions that are partisan in nature, particularly questions that relate to current U.S. partisan politics. Feel free to ask any hard-hitting questions about the life and times of Nelson Mandela. As many of you know, I have strong opinions regarding what I believe were mistakes Nelson Mandela made related to the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. And I hope that this will also be addressed with our community this evening. Nelson Mandela is considered to be one of the great moral voices and great world leaders of the 20th century. And yet many proud Jewish supporters of Israel feel and would like to better understand why it was that he did not come across as a greater champion of the Jewish people and Israeli freedom. I look forward to this part of the discussion, and I know that Christo does too. As you all know, many in the Jewish community today, in Jackson and in St. George, Utah, are struggling now during these uncertain times. Please consider making a one-time tax-deductible contribution to our Chabad Jewish centers so we can support those of us in our community who are struggling with dignity during these challenging times. Since you are all at your computers already, please visit jewishwyoming.com/donate or jewishsouthernsu.com/donate. Okay, let's get started. Christo Brand's early years were spent on a small farm outside Stanford, a small village in South Africa. The farm was called, and I'm going to butcher this, Gode Vetur, a Dutch word meaning good trust. He went to a small school on a nearby farm from the age of 5 years. Life was tough for Christo. The family had no luxuries, not even electricity. At age of 12, his father developed pneumonia, and the family was forced to leave the farm and move to his uncle's house in Paro Valley. After matriculation, rather than join the army for national service, as was compulsory for every white male, Christo decided to join the prison service. After a year in Kroonstad, he was sent to work on Robben Island in 1978 at the age of 19. That was the first time Christo met Nelson Mandela, was 60 years old at the time. This was where they formed a relationship which was to become so much more, a close friendship built on trust and mutual respect for one another. In 1982, Mandela was transferred to Pollsmoor prison. On the 13th of March that year, Christo married Estelle. Soon afterward, Christo was transferred to Pollsmoor and was responsible for guarding Mandela for the next 6 years. On his release from prison, Mandela organized a job for Christo as an administrative and logistics manager in the Constitutional Assembly. Once the Constitution was adopted, Ahmed Cathadra arranged for Christo to start work again on the famed Robben Island, this time as a supervisor in the island shop. The wheel had turned full circle, and Christo was back where he started his work career. But this time on an island freed of prisoners, a place of healing, and most importantly, reconciliation, a place of endless fascination to international tourists, historians, political activists, and anyone with an interest in South Africa's turbulent past. In 2014, Christo wrote his book, Doing Life with Mandela, My Prisoner, My Friend. Please go ahead and get yourself a copy on Amazon. He did this book together with Barbara Jones. In the foreword, Ahmed Cathadra writes, my lasting impression of Christo Brand is that he's a very good human being. He's not a politician. He's just a very caring man who took chances for other people, which could have brought him grave trouble. We are now going to ask Andrew Russell to take over from here and begin today's interview. Please put your hands together for a warm Wyoming and Utah welcome for Andrew and our distinguished guest, Christo Brand.
Thank you, Rabbi, and warm greetings from South Africa. Christo is in Cape Town, and I'm in a small village called Hermanus, which is not far from where Christo grew up. So we're going to go back to the early years. And Christo, if you could just share with the audience, what was it like growing up on the farm in those early days? And what was the big lesson that you learned from your father in those times?
On a farm where I grew up, I was the only white child playing with African children. One day I was disrespectful to the elderly African man when my father gave me a hiding and said to me, the person can be black, but a human being like us. God has made us all different colors, different look alike. We must respect each other as human beings. We was very poor. And then when my father gets sick, this rich farmer moved us off the farm. We moved to the city. For the first time in the city, I stayed in a suburb, which was for whites only. I have only white friends. I didn't have colored of Indian friends, of African friends to play with at all.
And then, Christo, if you could explain or just share with us, what was the decision that you then made? Why did you decide to join the prison service? And if you could then lead into the fact that your first posting was to the island of Robben Island when you were 18 years old. How did you end up joining the prison service?
While I was still in school, a year before I left school, one of my best friends was called up for military service. Like I said, it was compulsory for all white children leaving school 2 years for military. That day when I see my friend off in the Cape Town station, he said to me, he not really want to join the military. He don't want to fight black people in the townships. That years, the military operating in our townships. He don't want to fight black people on the borders. He want to become a medical doctor, but the government said 2 years of your life. 6 months after that, he was killed on the borders by so-called terrorists. When we sat in that church that day, the priest said what hero this gentleman was for our country. How this gentleman protect our country against the black enemy. For me, the gentleman was not a hero. The blacks was not my enemy. I made a decision. I will look for something alternative, not to join the military. Then a gentleman visited our school in that year before I left school, and they're looking for people who can guard prisoners. I was not interested till I'd explained to him, I want to become an electrician. He said, that's a right opportunity to take. You can become a prison guard. After your training, you apply to work in a prison workshops, become an electrician and train prisoners to become electricians. I signed up, I go for my training. After my training, they sent me to Robben Island. And that morning when I arrived on the island, the head of the prison welcomed us, tell us we're going to meet the biggest criminals in the history of South Africa. I was trained with criminals, tattoo faces, gangsters, see how they behaved. And then he told us this guy is in for life imprisonment. And we are here not to talk to them, just give instructions, force him for hard labor and everything like that. That was my first introduction to Robben Island.
All right, and then one of Christo's jobs was to check that the prisoners in the morning open up the cells. And that was the first time that he read cell numbers and this prisoner 46664 and the name Mandela. Now, what you have to understand is Christo was 18 years old. He was a young white Afrikaans boy in South Africa, and he had no idea who this guy was. He was sent to guard these prisoners, and one of his jobs was to work in the censor's office, which was the heart of the prison. Christo, if you could just share with us what happened that day in the censor's office that made you realize that this person, Mandela, was different from the other prisoners.
Like I said, when I start work on Robben Island, I work in a limestone quarry where they break lime rocks and things. I didn't realize there's names really, it was just normal people, prisoners for me. But it was me bad to see how these old people was being treated. 3 months later, I ended up in an office they called the censor's office. When I arrived there, my superior welcomed me. He said to me, I must help the guys unpack these apple boxes and count these cards. When we unpack these boxes and start counting the cards, we count 55,000 plus a few odd cards. And that was birthday cards for Mandela's 60th birthday. That was massive. After that, the sergeant, then I realized this man must be somebody very popular. Then the sergeant said, we must try to shift the cards and see from what countries the cards come from America, Germany, Spain, Italy, all these countries. But after we sorted out these cards, we found there was only 12 cards from South Africa. Then it was strange for me. I asked the sergeant, why South Africans not know this man? At that stage, I didn't know this name really. His answer to me was, he said, Brandt, if anybody dared to send a card for Nelson Mandela, and the police identified that person should have been arrested, 90 days solid confinement, electrical shock, tortured, and maybe killed. That's how serious things was in South Africa. So that is my first interaction knowing this name properly. Out of that massive of cards, Mandela received only 6 from his direct family. All the other cards was destroyed and burned, and he was never been informed about that massive of cards.
All right, and then leading on from that, one of Christo's jobs was to handle visitors to the island. And on one occasion, Mandela's wife, Winnie Mandela, applied for a visit to the island. And Christo was told by his superiors that visitors were on the way and he must go and tell Mandela about his visit. Christo, if you could just share with us, this was the first real interaction where you and Mandela were on your own. Please take us through what happened on that day when you told him he had a visitor and when you led him down to this visitor center on Robben Island.
That morning when I walked to Mandela's cell to inform him about the visit, he quickly asked me, Mr. Brandt, just 5 minutes that I can properly dress with my prison uniform, which I put aside for Sunday's inspection. After that, he reported to me it's ready for his visit. I put him on leg irons. I lifted up the chains for him, and I could have marched him out of prison to this visiting location. That morning when I walked in front of me, after a while, he looked back. He asked me, Mr. Brandt, where are you come from? You put a leg iron smooth around my ankles. You lift up the chains for me, and you treat me with respect. I look at him. I said, Mandela, I grew up on a farm, and my father said, I must respect elderly people. Immediately, his reaction was, that's good news, Mr. Brandt. You can help me, give me advice in my prison garden. In a prison courtyard, Mandela has a small prison garden there, where he plants some chilies, tomatoes, onions. That was to spice up the bad prison food. I didn't comment on that. We walked on. After a while, he looked back again. He asked me, Mr. Brandt, is your parents still alive? I said, yes. He said, send them my greetings. That was something strange, a prisoner tell me to send greetings to my parents. I walked on. I didn't comment. And then just before we get to this building, he looked back. He asked me, Mr. Brandt, are you studying? I said, no. He said, Mr. Brandt, you must study. Study is the future of our country. And through studies, you can become the head of this prison and understand us better. I didn't comment. I locked him in a single cell there. More prisoners start piling up. My superior said to me, Brandt, the boat has just docked. Fetch the visitors from the boat. That morning when I walked to the boat, the 10 African ladies just get off the boat. I direct them to the visiting location. On the way there, I see the lady take off the blanket, a raincoat, because she was sitting outside on the boat. Then I observed she got the backpack. And when she take that off, I observed she got a baby infant with her. Prisoners was not allowed to see children. That year, Mandela could have seen one visit every 3 months for 30 minutes by one person only. So I instructed her, ma'am, he was not allowed to bring the baby to Romaland, but leave the baby in the waiting room with other visitors. She was still begging me to take her along inside to see her husband, which my answer was no. And she begged me I must ask my superior. But then we put the prisoners in the different cubicles because visits was not contact visits. We collect the visitors. We instructed Winnie Mandela to leave the baby behind. And when she's in a cubicle, a steel panel opened and they start communicating with each other by telephone. And during this communication, she told her husband, Mandela, she had brought his grandchild to Robben Island. That moment, Mandela looked back. He begged me, please, Mr. Brandt, is it possible just to see the infant through the window? Which my answer to him at that moment was, I said, Mandela, you know the prison regulations, you're not allowed to see a child. You could have seen the disappointment in his face, and he carried on with his visit. A while later, my superior passed. He touched my shoulder. He said, Brandt, tell your prisoner 5 minutes left of his visit. That moment when I informed Mandela about 5 minutes left of his visit, he looked back again and he begged me, Mr. Brandt, just ask your superior again. I walked to my superior, asked him what Mandela requested. He looked at me, he said, Brandt, if you can get hold of that baby without Winnie Mandela, no, we can show Mandela the child. My answer to Mandela then was no. I closed the window. Winnie Mandela has been taken back to the waiting room. But that moment when Mandela stand up from his cubicle and he asked me, Mr. Brandt, can you please pass this message to my wife? Because he looked at his notebook. I said, Mandela, you just have a message. Visit. What is your message? Please tell us you must apply for visit for Christmas Day. That was more than 6 months in advance. That moment, my superior walked in, asked me, what is the delay? I explained him what Mandela requested. He looked at me, he said, Brandt, fetch his wife back, let he can tell him himself. That moment when I walked to the waiting room, Winnie Mandela already had the infant in her arms. There was rotation of visitors. I walked to and I said, ma'am, can't I hold the baby? I never held the African child. She pushed it in my arms, grabbed the handbag, tried to bribe with money. When I tell her, ma'am, I'm not allowed to show the baby to your husband, not allowed to take your money, but please go back into the visiting booth. She was still begging me, which my answer was no. But when she's in the visiting booth, I locked her in. I sneaked to the side of Mandela. After Mandela passed his message, my superior closed the window. Mandela see me in a passage and he came straight to me. That moment when he came to me, take the infant out of my arms, kiss the child twice, and there was tears in his eyes. And I become quite emotional. That same moment, Winnie Mandela knocked on the door, she's locked in. I quickly take the baby back from him, go to her side, apologize, gave her the infant back. She was still begging me to show him the child, which my answer was no. When I take Mandela back to his cell, he just thanked me what I've done. He didn't share it with his comrades. He was afraid if that message leaked out, he should have lost his studies, visits, or privileges. I should have been charged, smuggled with a prisoner, which was called a terrorist. Minimum sentence they promised us was 5 years. That secret was between me and Mandela for nearly 20 years till he became the president of our country. Then he tell the people in parliament what important person I was in his life.
All right, so that was the first thing that Christo really did for his prisoner. And years later, Winnie Mandela presented Christo with a book, and she wrote this message in the book, which just showed how much that visit had meant to her. So you can just read that. And And so from that moment onwards, there was this bond between Christa and Mandela. In 1982, the authorities realized that Mandela was becoming too popular and too powerful on the island, so they moved him to the mainland to a prison called Pollsmoor Prison. And at exactly the same time, Christa was wanting to get married to Estelle. There were no married quarters on the island, so they moved. Christa and Estelle got married and they moved to Pollsmoor. And that was where Christa was put in charge of Mandela. And for the next 6 years, Christa was responsible for looking after and guarding Mandela. This was when we went back there recently on a visit to see where Mandela's cell had been. And there was a section on the roof where they had a little tennis court. And Christa started playing table tennis and started playing tennis with Mandela. This was a section on the roof where Mandela had a small garden and Christa helped him with his garden. So this is where a lot of things started happening because it was impossible for anyone else to get into this section except by applying to Christa for permission and authority. We're not going to talk about all of the things that happened out there. But Christa, if you could just share with our audience about that one Christmas day. What happened on that one Christmas day with you and Mandela?
Every day in that section, between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock, we lock the prisoners in so that our guards can rotate for lunch. That day on Christmas, when I came back from my lunch, it was 2 o'clock. When I opened that cell that day, Mandela walked to me, asked me, Mr. Brandt, I want to talk something to you. I want to discuss something to you. I said, what is the problem? He said, it's Christmas today. All over the world, people are celebrating this day. We didn't get any visitors. Our few prisoners, there was 4 of them, also want to celebrate this Christmas. Can we celebrate with you as guards because you are free men? Just sit. I said, Mandela, how are you going to do that? He said, if we sit around a table and drink a coffee with them, that will be a Christmas celebration for them. So I speak to the other guards, we agree. Mandela dish up a table, put a blanket on the table, there was no cloths. And then he gave coffee for us. There was fruitcake, dried fruits, and some chocolate sweets. After the ceremony was lock-up time. I called Mandela once again. I said to him, Mandela, I want to tell you something today. First time in my life I sit with a prisoner around the table, enjoying a Christmas. Everything was fine, but your fruitcake was very bad. And the old man is quiet for a while and he looked at me. He said, Mr. Brandt, you forget something. You was the one who bought us the fruitcake. And then I realized I must rectify this. And I said to him, Mandela, you know, the big shopping mall bake fruitcake in bulk. They don't put in brandies or liqueurs or anything in there. But my wife baked in October and dosed it with brandies. And tonight we're going to eat fruitcake. But I will try to bring you a piece from home. The next day I take him a piece of fruitcake from home, give it for him. He shared it with his comrades. And that year was him, Sisulu, Muslaba and Ahmed Gefrada, them. They shared it with him. And then a year later, I forget about this. Mandela must write an application for Christmas for this special privilege. So in his application, he can apply for 500 gram fruitcake, 500 gram chocolates, 500 grams of dried fruits. When he hands his application for me, I must still take it to the head of the prison for approval before I can deduct the money to buy this stuff. When he gave me that application, he said, Mr. Brandt, can you make sure the fruitcake is from your wife? Then I've got a difficult task. So I convinced with my wife, there's some other guards who want fruitcake, never told her about war prisoners. So she baked fruitcake for Mandela and them till he was released. After release, Mandela contacted me that year, 1990. He contacted me and he placed his order for his fruitcake. Then my wife realized she was baking fruitcake for them. Then she baked fruitcake for Mandela till he passed.
Okay, and some of you will know that the last 2 years of Mandela's imprisonment, they moved into this house, which was in the winelands area of Cape Town, near Franschhoek. And he spent his last 2 years in this house. And then on the 11th of February, 1990, he was released from prison. There's a statue outside that prison now, which you can see one day when you all come to visit us in Cape Town. And he was then transferred to the Cape Town City Hall, where he made his first speech as a free man. And as you then know, on the 10th of May, 1994, he was inaugurated as not only the first black president of South Africa, but also the first democratically elected president of South Africa. Because that was the first year that people of all races could vote in an election. Now, during this time of Mandela's presidency, Christo was in touch with him, and as you heard earlier from the rabbi, Mandela arranged for Christo to work in his office. Here is a picture of Christo with Cyril Ramaphosa, who is our current president, who was also partly responsible for getting Christo back to work at Robben Island. Christo, if you could now, I'd like you to just share a little bit with our audience about the relationship between Nelson Mandela and your son, and how important it was for him at that stage to see children.
You know, when I smuggled this baby from Mandela on Robben Island, then in 1985, a few years later, Mandela was in isolation at Portsmouth prison because it took him away from his comrades because government started having talks with him. He was totally in a basement of the maximum security prison, no fresh air, no light, nothing, but they got access to television and things like that. From that isolation, we take Mandela every fortnight, so sometimes a little bit more, to the minister's house for talks and discussions. But one evening I get a message, I must give Mandela a message, and I must go to his cell. And that night, my wife was out. I sit with my baby infant with me, and I take my baby infant to Mandela's cell. He becomes so fond of my son, always have some sweets ready for him. But when I work in Parliament, one day Mandela called me, and he drafted a letter for my son. And the letter was for his 16th birthday, which he drafted a letter for my son. 2 years after that, he called me again. He said, Mr. Brandt, what is your son going to study next year? I explained to him he wanted to become a civil engineer. He said, leave it in my hands. I will get him a scholarship. So Mandela arranged a scholarship for him in New York. When I informed my son that evening when Mandela phoned me that you've got a scholarship in New York, but only after 10 months you can start there in October, my son said to me he's not really interested to leave the country. He don't want to become a civil engineer anymore. He wants to become a commercial diver. Immediately I must phone Mandela's office that next morning, and then Mandela requested he want to see my boy in person, have a chat with him. So I take my son to Mandela's house. It was so nice, have a nice chat, but he asked me, he wanted to speak privately with my son. So I was excused from the meeting. After the meeting, he called me and he pointed me with a finger. He said, Mr. Brandt, you know, our parents all made same mistakes in life. We listen to our children when they're small, what they want to be one day. Now we want to pressurize them in that direction. We must leave children what they want to do. I will support him. I will back him up. I will pay for it. So Mandela was paid for my son's scholarship, and he became a commercial diver. And also start working at Robben Island, doing the harbor construction at the harbor wall and things like that. So my son was very happy to work there. And then in 2005, my son died in a car accident. Without me informed Mandela on the day of the death of my son, he get a message from somewhere, I don't know, but he phoned me and explained to me, he said, Mr. Brandt, a parent mustn't lose a child. A child must rather lose a parent. And he started explaining to me how he felt when he was a prisoner on Robben Island, when he lost his eldest son to kill himself. How bad it was for him not could have attended the funeral. What happened? Mandela made excuse. He was not in South Africa when he phoned me. But he sent Alma Kathrada, Barbara Hogan, people from Parliament, all to my son's funeral. And a few weeks after the funeral, he invited me back to his house to meet me and my other family. So I visited him after that again.
All right, and you know, now these are some of the photos of Christo and Mandela. And you know, there were a lot of moments between the two of them which led all the way up until Mandela passed away in 2013. Christo was invited by the family to be a guest at the funeral, and he flew up to Kunu, which is in the Eastern Cape, which is where Mandela had grown up and where he said that he wanted to be buried. Christo, if you could just share with our audience, what was it like on that day of the funeral? And maybe just share some reflections on the life that you shared with Nelson Mandela.
I was invited to the funeral by the family. That morning I sit behind Zinzi Mandela at the funeral. And then I said to myself, when the coffin passed, I must touch this coffin to say goodbye to my friend. When the coffin passed, I touched the coffin and I look at the coffin, I say to myself, for 27 years, this old man was in prison. For 14 years, he was working in a limestone quarry, breaking lime rock, nearly lost his eyesight. Where he slipped on the rocks, broke his ankle, fractured his knee and broke some ribs. But he walked out of prison with reconciliation in his heart. Then I think back, I asked him one day, Mandela, don't you hate the white people of the country? His answer to me was, he said, Mr. Brandt, I can never hate the white people of the country because my comrades are white. And I didn't understand much about it till I was invited to a shul one evening in Johannesburg, where I was speaking to the people out there. And then a few days later, they sent me a book, The Jewish Memories of Nelson Mandela. And it's by Chief Rabbi Cyril Harris. And I could have seen all the people supporting Mandela during the struggle. Faces is reflected in this book, and people help him. Then I understand that he got a lot of white comrades supporting him. Then I think back, when he became president, I was very happy and excited. My prisoner became the president. But one morning in his office, when he invited me for coffee, I said to him, President Mandela, there's something I must tell you today. He said, Mr. Brandt, we knew each other so many years. You can tell me anything which is on your heart. I said, you don't feel like a president for me. You still feel like a prisoner. He said, why? I said, because when you was guarded on Robbenland, you was guarded by prison guards. When you was released, I never see you walking as a free man in a shopping mall. You was guarded by security. And now you're the president. You've got more police around you, still guarding you. You still feel like a prisoner walking for me when I see you with this crowd of people. He's quiet for a moment. Then he said, Mr. Brandt, you are right. But today, this prisoner can tell the police in what direction to walk. He let me believe he's feeling free. Then 3 months after that, he called me again to his office for coffee, made me sit, and he pointed me with a finger and he said, Mr. Brandt, you said I'm a prisoner. I just come back from holiday in Bahamas. And I tell my security what you told me. And I tell him I don't want to see them in sight. And I walk alone in that beach. And he said, I didn't walk too far. Then I see a young couple approach me. And a young lady looked at me and she said, Sir, sorry, are you not President Nelson Mandela? He said, Mr. Brandt, then I get worried. Or what I tell that young lady that morning, I said, ma'am, I would love to meet that guy myself one day. So I believe he was feeling free. Then I think back when he passed, he laid a foundation for the new South Africa. But I think back, we visited a school one day. When we walked out of that school, Mandela stopped, he touched my shoulder, he said, Brandt, look there, black and white children playing together. It was very strange for him to tell me that. I said, President Mandela, when you become the president, the schools are open for all colors today. He said, that's good. That's very good. After a while, he stopped again. He said, Brandt, but look, that black kid sharing an apple with a white kid. I said, Mandela, if you look at that small kids, they're so small, they just enjoy life. They don't see a color. He said, you are right, Mr. Brandt. That's a rainbow nation I want to see develop in my country. Remember, we tried to change Robben Island into a university. We take over a government. We never run a government before. Somewhere in the line, my comrade's going to fail. That's a time to educate this youth. They will be our future leaders of our country. So I believe the youth will still stand up and lead our country in different direction. 3 months after that was my book launch in the UK. And that evening, Zinzi Mandela picked up. She pointed me with her finger and she said, Mr. Brandt, you can't run away from me. My last promise to my dad was, he said, if he can't attend your book launch, I must represent him. So my book was very well received in the UK, South Africa, America, and different places in the world. So my book is out called Mandela, My Prisoner, My Friend.
All right, so, we're getting to the end now before we take question time. And I just thought I'd finish with a picture of the Long Walk to Freedom, which was Nelson Mandela's autobiography. And, just to show the respect that he had for Christo, he signed this copy for Christo's family in 1996, and where he said in Afrikaans, best wishes to a remarkable family, signed by Nelson Mandela. And, just to let you know, the rabbi spoke earlier about respecting people because you don't know what journey they've been on. These are 2 direct quotes which come from Long Walk to Freedom. So if you'd like to just read those, where Mandela refers to Christo Brandt in his autobiography. All right, so Rabbi, thank you for inviting us. Those are just some little insights into Christo's journey with Nelson Mandela. There's a lot more that we could have spoken about, but You did say you'd like to leave some time for questions. So what I'm going to do is I am going to hand back to you. And if you would like to start with the questions, Krista is available.
Thank you so very much, Andrew, for the fantastic interview. And thank you, Christo, for those inspiring words. Your presentation was phenomenal. In addition to all of these ways that you can contact Christo, I have also posted in the chat where you can go to consider making a contribution to Christo so he can continue sharing his story of reconciliation. Andrew and Christo have given of their time for our community freely. We've made a contribution to Christo, and I encourage all of you to support his work so he can continue doing the great work that he does of sharing his life story with Nelson Mandela, the story of reconciliation. I urge you, please go onto the link that I posted on this chat to make a contribution today. Questions from the community. Let's begin with, if anyone has a question, just go live, go on your mic, unmute yourself, and you can ask your question directly to Christo. Make sure that it ends with a question mark. Steve.
Thank you so much. I've been in Mandela's cell. It's not a imaginable place to be for so many years. And so, God bless you for who you are. I wonder, were you alone in your ability to relate to Mandela, or were you criticized by your fellow guards? Were you kind of set aside for being friendly with this prisoner?
Okay. You visit Mandela's cell, you see the size of the cell. I will first want to tell you about the cell. Many nights I visit that section where Mandela was exercising 2 o'clock at night. I asked him, Mandela, why you exercise that time of night? He said, Mr. Brandt, this cell of mine become like a fridge. Very cold. I must exercise my body to warm up that I can sleep again. But like you said, a lot of my people, of my fellow friends who work with me, guards who work with me, didn't knew that I become friended with Mandela. They only found out our relationship when Mandela became the president. And then one of my supervisors stopped at me and he said to me, you are a sellout. We should have killed you. We should have locked you up. You should have been in prison with these prisoners. Look, these people take over our country. What's going to happen with us today? They was very upset. That same person I met about 6 years after that again. Then he thanked me for what I've done for Mandela. He's sorry what he told me. He said he never thought this man will walk out of prison with reconciliation in his heart. He never thought this man will stand up in South Africa, bring the people with the World Cup rugby together in South Africa when we win the World Cup 1995. He never thought of that. And he tried to speak the gospel of reconciliation. When he bring up the reconciliation process in South Africa, they never thought of that. That's why they think I was doing a good job. But my friends around me didn't know that I become friended with him. There was a few waters which I identified to become friended with prisoners, but I could have not identified them like immediately, but only found out many years later.
Thank you very much.
What an incredible story that a man that was a prisoner for so many years, and then by some miracle, not only was freed, but became president of the country, and then was associating with all the highest people all over, religiously, politically, world leaders, that he would remember a prison guard that befriended him. It's just another indication of what a great man he was, Nelson Mandela. You're so lucky to have been a friend of his.
Steve, I'm going to put you on mute and allow for others to ask questions if they have them. Thank you very much for sharing. For those of you who have any questions for Christo, please unmute yourself. This is very informal. We're also keeping an eye on Facebook. If anyone has questions over there, please post your questions. Rabbi Mendy is monitoring the questions that are coming in on Facebook. For those of you that asked them, and we will make sure to bring them over to Christo. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself so you can interact with Christo and ask your questions directly. Go ahead. Andy,
I have a
any
question.
questions? Malka, go ahead.
Malka.
Knowing what we know about Mandela, his past, his imprisonment years, and being supported by the Jewish community, what can you say about his relationship with Israel versus his close relationship with the Palestinians?
You know, Mandela was also visiting the Jewish shul, a shul in Cape Town, where he was also talking at the shul at one evening, where he was opening something in the shul. I can't remember what, they even filmed that, but it was really one piece in the world. And I know he mentioned something there, which he said, the world will be free when Palestine is free. And you know, and then people was clapping hands and said, if people can work together, it can happen. But it was really there to try to bring peace into the different countries. He tried to do that.
I understand that, but Israel has always wanted to do peace with the Palestinians and come to terms with them and made a lot of concession for them. So it still does not explain his closeness to the other side. I know you can't answer for, maybe you can't answer for him, but this is something that always kind of made me wonder.
Yes, I know that is always a problem there. The Palestinians don't want to come and listen to and sit down and talk and bring peace and reconciliation. But Mandela tried in his best of his ability to bring people together, but still, I knew it didn't work. And still today, there are still problems.
Malka, thank you very much for your great question. Pamela, would you like to come on mic and ask your question directly to Christo?
Thank you, Rabbi. Christo, I just wondered how the school system has, have they encouraged the equality that you have shown? Are they now teaching children together and to learn to respect each other as you do?
In our school system today, after 1994, all schools are multiracial open today. Black and white, colored, Indian, all of them are at one schools. But they try to bring the gospel of reconciliation in schools, that children can play together. If you look at the schools where a lot of small kids come in together, they don't see a color. They just enjoy life. They're playing sport together. There's no fight and things in the schools. And me and Ahmad Kathrada, I don't know if you know Ahmad Kathrada, he was one of Mandela's co-accused. We visit a lot of schools and we talk about the relationship between a prisoner ward and a prisoner and how things happen in South Africa, where they can be privileged. They've got freedom today. They've got opportunities to study. They've got schools where they didn't have that opportunities when they was younger that years. And when Mandela walked out, he tell the people also, now is the time to educate yourselves. Like on Robben Island, for instance, Mandela even sent a letter around which he mobilized and said, comrades, we never try to escape from this place. The longer we stay in this prison, the more we can prepare us for freedom. We can educate ourselves. That was his vision, education. And he always said to me, Mr. Brandt, when you see a person begging on the street for money, don't give that person money. Rather give him food, accommodation, but if you can help him with education. Education is the most powerful tool in the hand of a person, which he can never be taken away. He can work for himself. He was a person for education. That was his legacy.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pamela and Christo. Thank you for sharing education. It's key to everything in life. If we have the capacity to be able to think and understand, we have the capacity to be able to change the world for the better. Andrew, I made a mistake in the link that I posted. I just copied and pasted the link that you had sent me, but I guess it's taking people to my payment and then they're not able to make a payment. What is the better way if people would like to make a contribution to Christo for them to be able to do so? I know that several have already messaged me saying that they tried and they're finding my visa information up over there. Please don't take down my visa information and charge yourself a nice vacation somewhere.
So the easiest way would be for each person to email me. The email address is info@christobrand.co.za. I can post it in the chat section.
Please do so.
And if anyone does want to make a contribution, if they email me the amount that they would like to contribute, then I will be able to send them a secure link, and they will be able to pay it that way. We really appreciate it. Thank you for that offer. I'll put our email address in the chat room if anyone would like to make a contribution.
Thank you very much. Andy, do you have a question? And anyone on Facebook, please post your questions. Rabbi Mendy is monitoring Facebook to make sure that if you have a question, your questions will be asked to Christo. We still have another 12 minutes, so let's get rolling. Andy.
I do have a question and a comment. I seem to have lost my video. Let me just see if
we are seeing you and hearing you fine. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm back now. Yeah, I came to this. I'm sorry, I woke up late, and what year did Nelson Mandela pass away, if I may ask?
In 2013.
2013.
Yeah, December 2013.
I think observing South Africa in these last 7 years, I think many of us have been disappointed by the mediocrity, self-interest, corruption, just disappointing. I was wondering what you think Nelson Mandela, how might he react were he to reappear in 2020, and what might he say to his countrymen at this point? He's always been able to inspire and uplift them. What do you think about that, Christo?
What I can say, after Mandela laid a foundation for the new South Africa, but when he stepped down, people after them become corrupt. There was a lot of corruption in our country, everything. But there was this president, Cyril Ramaphosa, which is our president today. He was one Mandela really liked. He would love to have him as president when he stepped down, but he was too young. So he go into the private sector, he go into businesses and things. But Mandela was very proud of this man, because this man was sitting with the drafting of the constitution, which made the constitution adopted, which accommodate all South Africans in South Africa, which keep us safe in that constitution. He was very proud of him, work it out with the National Party of the time. Now Cyril Ramaphosa is in power. He's our president. And I believe he can make a change in the country, but still you have obstacles with people around him, which is corrupt. Because he's a president, but from the ANC side, there's still people around him which is corrupt. We can face him down. But he's investing the things going wrong in the country, the frauds and things. He bring it to light. It comes up in the newspaper, come in the media and everything. He wants people to see it. And then he will fire that, do investigations. He fire that person, try to get his own person in to rectify that, to build our country together. You will see from he come into power, things have started changing to the better in South Africa. And I believe if he can be longer in power and he can get all his people around him which support him, then he can be a very strong president and things will be the same as Mandela's wishes was, because he lived the legacy of Mandela.
Andy, feel free to unmute yourself to do a follow-up question. You're welcome.
I was wondering, Christo, what you thought. I mean, besides the corruption, of course, there must have been lingering resentment on both sides, which is always a poisonous element. What do you think South Africa's greatest challenges are today? And what, in your most optimistic view, where do you see the country going?
We must be very optimistic in South Africa. We believe our country can go in a better direction. Sorry, with this COVID virus, it's a little bit of a problem. A lot of people losing their jobs and people get unemployed and everything. But Cyril Ramaphosa is trying best in his ability to get people invest in South Africa, bring new business opportunities up in South Africa. And if this virus can phase out, I think our country will start from scratch anew and rebuild ourselves. We've got some hope.
Does South Africa have the medical capabilities to deal with COVID as it's now hit? We were there in to the middle of March, and just as it began to hit. And I was wondering, outside of Cape Town and Johannesburg, are there sufficient hospital facilities to deal with it? And
yeah,
even
maybe I could come in there. They have obviously it is You know, we went into a serious lockdown from the middle of March, and the reason was to prepare the medical facilities. So, you know, our numbers are going up. You know, who knows when they're going to peak, and what the peak is going to be. We do have a relatively young population in South Africa, and the numbers are going up, but they have built a lot of field hospitals. Saul, if you were in Cape Town, you might have seen the International Convention Center.
Yes.
Been turned into a hospital. In Khayelitsha, they've built a field hospital. So they have managed to build a lot of field hospitals to cope with the virus as it escalates. But you know, whether we're going to be able to cope, you know, time will tell. You know, we're hoping, yeah, we're all hoping for the best.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please, we still have another few minutes to ask more questions. Kameya, Judy, Elon, SL, Joshua Beck, Dr. Beck, Daniel Gale, Craig Michael, Sam Bauer, Malka Kenter, you already asked one. W. Richter. If anyone has any questions that they would like to ask, please feel free to come on mic. We'd love to see your face if you're going to ask a question. And we'd love to hear from you. If you already asked the question, hold on just a bit to see if others are still waiting to ask their questions that didn't have a chance yet to ask them. Let's allow for others to ask. Rabbi Mendy, any questions coming in from Facebook? Well, you're on mute.
Not that I see. There's a lot of people joining, but I don't see anyone asking questions.
A lot of people joining on Facebook. Those of you who are on Facebook who would like to partake in the actual dialogue, post your question. We will ask it of Christo. This has been fascinating and very inspirational in terms of the reconciliation component. The world needs more of this attitude now more than ever. Anyone with additional questions? Steve, if you have a question with a question mark, go ahead and ask it.
So when I was in South Africa, I was there right after before and after. But most of the violence, surprisingly, wasn't black against white. Most of the violence that happened was black against black. And that always was something, it was hard to understand. But could you talk, has that continued? Does what I'm saying ring a bell with you?
Yes. What I can say, when you see that black fighting blacks in townships, what happened after we opened our borders? We've got so many foreigners from different countries here. We've got Zimbabwe, Nigerians, Somalians, Pakistanis, all over in South Africa, and all try to put up their businesses. Our people was neglected to get some jobs, and that people have skills. Look at Zimbabwe. A lot of that people came here have got good skills. They take up over the job opportunities of our people. That's where this thing comes, blacks fighting blacks on the time. But now with the virus, things come still, people start understanding each other, and it's a little bit more quiet and fighting blacks each other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
W. Richter, it looks like you might have a question. Welcome.
Rabbi, good day, and thank you to you and your community. I don't have a question for Christo, but rather just a recommendation. I've just read the book and finished a few days ago, and can only heartily recommend that you and your community go onto Amazon and get a copy of this book, because it is the most remarkable tale, what we've heard this evening is just scratching the surface. There are just so many stories about the time that these two spent together on the island and at Pollsmoor. And there is just such a message of hope that comes out from reading the book. So please get hold of a copy and read these stories.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that recommendation. And it was heartfelt. And please, everyone go ahead on Amazon and get your copy. I will be doing that just after we get off this call. Dr. Beck, any questions? Elon, you're awfully quiet. Kameya, we would love to hear from you. Craig, don't be shy. Dr. Beck, go ahead.
Rabbi,
love to see your face.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we'd love to see your
Thank you so much for the. Oh, I'm actually in the car. You don't want to see me. All right, hold on. How about it? It was a wonderful, wonderful talk. I took my family to South Africa 2 years ago, and we had a wonderful time. And we visited both prisons that Mandela was kept, and it really an impressive talk you gave, and it's an amazing relationship that you've built. When I was an undergrad at the University of Florida, I had the opportunity to meet Winnie Mandela. She came and spoke, and I know they had a very complex relationship, and she stayed with him while he was in jail, but then shortly thereafter, they got divorced. Do you have any insight into their relationship?
What I can mention there, you know, she stand behind Mandela for 27 years while he was a prisoner. When they came out, he was an elderly man already, and she already have some relationship with somebody she built up while he was in prison. So she didn't want to stand off that relationship. So they have a discussion, and Mandela was prepared to give her freedom. So he said to me, where every time I was at meetings, sometimes Mandela is there, Winnie Mandela sat on his right-hand side, and Gracia sat on the left-hand side. I asked him one day, Mandela, with his two wives, is there no complications or problems? He said, Winnie Mandela is still the mother of my children. She's still my comrade. She was still my first wife, but there's no complications. I still have my second wife now, and that was Gracia. It means there was a good relationship between them. But Winnie Mandela, I've got very good respect for her because she was fighting for 27 years for this old man. She fight the struggle outside while he was a prisoner. She just should have given up hope that years already. But she was there for him. Every time he pushed a button, he wants something from outside. He needs some funding, he needs some money. She was there to do it for him. She was just a hard worker for him and bring up his children. So there was that relationship till the end. You know, when Mandela passed, that moment when he passed, Winnie Mandela was still holding his hand. Gracia Machel was not in the house at that moment. Winnie Mandela was there, holding his hand. She was the one to break the news that she don't feel anything anymore. So she was still very close to him.
Very nice.
Just to lead on from your question, Joshua, and as we heard at the start of the talk, you know, Winnie was a firebrand. You know, she was a difficult person, but she, you know, she had been in solitary confinement. She had been under house arrest. She had had a dreadful life fighting the struggle. And, you know, for whatever her sins, whatever stuff she's supposed to have got up to, you know, when you walk in someone's shoes and you understand what she was going through and the way she was treated and the fact that she stood by Nelson Mandela fighting for freedom, you know, yeah. And that's why, you know, Christo is not a politician. He's a human being, you know, and he did this favor for Mandela. And, you know, if you heard from Christo there, if the authorities had found out that Christo had showed that baby to Mandela on Robben Island, Christo would have got 5 years in solitary confinement. You know, and that was why Winnie, when she found out about this years later, she was just in awe of this gentleman who had done that favor. So, you know, that was the relationship that Christo had with Winnie. It was a human relationship, and she appreciated what Christo had done for Mandela while he was in prison.
Thank you for all
Thank
of
you.
the
Really an amazing story.
It is now just after 11 o'clock. We have time perhaps for one more question. If anyone would like to come on mic and ask a final question of Christo, that would be wonderful before we have to call it a night. Please, a day. A night for you guys, a day for us. Please, any final questions before we get going? Or should we wrap this up? Any questions on Facebook coming in, Rabbi Mendy? We can't hear you. You're on mute. No more final questions. Thank you, Christo and Andrew, from the depths of our hearts for joining us. Again, for those of you who would like to be able to contribute towards Christo's important work, in the chat box, we have listed the email address for how you can reach out to Andrew Russell. I'm going to copy it one more time at the bottom of this chat so everyone can go on, email Andrew, and see how you can contribute to their important work so they can continue talking about reconciliation. This was a phenomenal, inspirational gathering. Thank you for taking the time to share with our community. Please, one final time, put your hands together for Christo Brand and Andrew Russell for your phenomenal presentation.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for having
Rabbi.
us.
Any final comments, Andrew or Christo?
Thank you, Rabbi. If you okay.
No, Christo, my final
Either one of
comment
you gets to attend any of the World Cup matches in '95?
Yes, I was lucky enough to be at the opening game at Newlands when the Springboks beat Australia, and I was also at the quarterfinal where New Zealand beat England. So I was at a couple. I was not more importantly, but when we hosted the Soccer World Cup, I was able to go to a lot of games. But I think if I could just, Christo, you can have the last word, but a message which we share with people, that we're all under lockdown at the moment, and we're all taking a bit of strain. And what Christo and I like to remind people is Mandela had 27 years of lockdown, and that puts it into perspective. Yes, we're taking strain, and I've got very close friends who have lost their jobs. It's dreadful. But for a gentleman like Mandela to come out of prison after 27 years and have reconciliation in his heart, it just puts things in perspective. We need to understand that we are going through tough times. But I think, that's for me, that is one message that I always take from these talks. So, Christo, if you'd like to have this final word before we say goodbye to our friends.
Okay, I just want to say Mandela was 27 years in lockdown, but he was a person, when he entered that prison, he was a fighter. He realized immediately he must change his attitude, his mind to reflect his life, and he started building a future for him. Even he sat in prison to die. He was preparing for freedom. He prepared with education. That's what he made his comrades around him aware and said, we don't think of the time in prison. We try to change this prison in our minds as our university. And we call it our university. And that is where they study. And that sometimes Mandela complained the days in prison was too short. Even he do hard labor. He worked a little bit in his garden. He was locked up. He do his exercise. He do his studies. But the days was too short for him. And by that word, I want to say to you all, if you come to visit South Africa one day, we can take you back to Robben Island. We can take you to Paulsmoor prison. We can take you to Victor Verster prison where Mandela walked out, and I can show you around on a private tour. And I want to say, I don't know if anybody have met Mandela in person, but there was one rabbi in Johannesburg said to me on one day, he said he was staying close to Mandela's house. And that day Mandela was walking on the pavement with his security. And when he walked and when Mandela see him, he came straight to him. The first thing what Mandela do, he come to the children, ask him what is their names, how old are they, what are they studying, what are they doing. He was interested in the life of the children, the life of the family. He was not thinking to do that for the next election. There was not election time, but so close and loved he was for family and children. Thank you.
Thank you. For those of you who would like to stick around and continue the conversation, including Christo and Andrew, if you'd like to stick around and continue the conversation, please, this was so fascinating. There's a lot to unpack. If anyone would like to continue discussing this, please feel free to stay on. I'll stay on for another few minutes and then I gotta run, but I'm gonna leave the video going. So anyone who has questions or discussion points or ideas that they wanna share, feel free to stick around so we can continue this conversation. It was heavy and dense to internalize. Let's spend some time, I guess, debriefing and discussing this further. Again, for those of you who want to call it a day and go on a hike and go on a bike ride or do your thing for the rest of the day, please feel free to do so. But for those of you who would like to stick around and continue the discussion, we would love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Christo.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you to all of you. Stay safe, and we'll see you one day in Cape Town, hopefully.
We would love that. My wife and I were in Cape Town a couple of years back and had a wonderful time. We were in Johannesburg. We were in Pilanesberg. We had a wonderful time there.
Brilliant.
I just want to say thank you so much. It's so nice for you to take the time and share the amazing story. So thank you both for that. It's really special. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rabbi Mendy, for inviting your community, for being a part of this. Any other questions or comments? Thank you to everyone. I see questions and comments coming into the chat. Thank you. Now that's tempting offer a tour with Christo. Thank you. Okay. Please, if anyone has any final questions, comments, discussion points, we would love to hear your voice. Andy, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this man and the times we are living in today, and the striking thing about this immense world is that we're so bereft of leadership today, of great people. We just need them so much, and they're just not there. And I'm thinking about the life of this man and the essential simplicity of his soul. That very intelligent man, but basically the courage and sticking to his principles. You know, it looks like a simple thing to be a man like Mandela, but obviously it is so rare and so difficult. And, you know, perhaps the 27 years should not be considered a burden, because in so many of our legends and mythologies and religions, the great leaders always, not always, but principally spent many years suffering and elevating themselves. They call it being in the wilderness. And I'm just wondering, I'm not really asking anything, I'm just wondering what we can hope for in the future, and why people who are in such positions of leadership are not satisfied with the aspiration to do as much good as they can, and just hold on to obligations and temptations that they dragged with them into leadership. It's just a, you know, I'm just mournful about how poorly we're being governed and led today in this world. And I'm worried about where we're going. Thank you.
Could it be that our leaders haven't suffered enough?
Our leaders.
What I can, what I maybe can mention there, Mandela was a down-to-earth, humble person. He was a person wanted to help people around him. He was a person who loved to see children grow up and give advice, listen to people. He's not just doing his own thing. He first listened to people before he gives advice. That's why he will be a very slow talker. He will take things in, memorize it, and then he will come back with a solution or an answer. Sit down and come to a solution. And that's what our leaders must do. They must first listen, sit down and reflect, and then do things.
Christo, did you ever see him angry?
Yes, I see Mandela angry on one occasion. You know, I see him angry on occasion where he asked me, I must help him with his education, because he was failing a subject, practical Afrikaans, for many years. So he asked me for advice and help, and I started helping him writing essays. But then I decided he's in isolation, he's kept alone. You get a newspaper or daily newspaper, which is English, to stop his newspaper. And they changed it to an Afrikaans newspaper, a Dutch newspaper. When I sent that Dutch newspaper into his cell, a few minutes later, the sergeant from the section came. He said, Mandela, very upset. He was so upset when he walked in there. He said, Mr. Brandt, what is this Afrikaans newspaper? I can't read this thing. Where's my newspaper? I said, Mandela, just reflected one moment. You asked me for help. That's the only way I can help you. You must force yourself to read this thing. You've got the dictionary. You can ask the guard to assist you. But that's the only way how I can help you to pass the subject. He was not happy with my solution, but he took the newspaper back then again. And after a while, he was really fond of the newspaper, even enrolled on the Sunday's newspaper, which was Afrikaans. So that way I see him upset. Other occasion I see him upset is when he started getting permission to get contact visits in 1987. Got contact visits. So Winnie Mandela came that day, but she came with a lady with her. And when the lady identified herself, Mrs. Sabata Talanyebu, we said, we can't have a contact visit with this lady because only first degree family is wife. So we see no contact visit. So we called him and said, Mandela, your wife is here with this lady, but it won't be a contact visit. He said he don't want a visit. Sent her back. He was very upset. Then we convinced him with the head of the prison. The head of prison said, Mandela, go to the visiting booth and see the lady through the glass. Tell the lady she must go to the newspaper and say, we refuse you to get your privilege as your contact visit with this lady. So he decided to listen to this major, and he walked to the visiting location. When they walked in and he see the lady in tears, and he said, Winnie Mandela explained who she is. She's the wife of King Sabata. He immediately sat down. He said, Mr. Brandt, I will take 2 visits. That time he could have 2 visits to talk the whole process through. Then he calmed down immediately like that. But he's a person, he said he's a human being. He can, normal human being. He also get cross. He's got all the same feelings as anybody. So that made him that powerful person. Okay.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? I want to thank Crystal and Andrew for really taking the time. So nice everyone joined. Really thank you so much. Make sure to buy a book. Make sure to send an email to info@something, I don't know, info@crystalbrand.co.za. And have a blessed July 4th weekend. Enjoy yourselves. And again, thank you so much. It's beautiful to have everybody. And l'chaim. If Rabbi Mendelson is still on, if you want to say hi. If not, it's been amazing. It's been a pleasure. And to many more times together.
Can you put that on the screen, that email?
Yes, I'll put it up there.
It's in the chat box, but I could do it again.
It's info@christobrand.co.za. Yeah, that would we would really appreciate that. And if you would like to email me, I will get back to you and we can do the secure payment. Thank you very much, guys, for your support, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Is anybody still alive? No.